This is a University of Otago podcast.
The festival is called Arts Festival Dunedin, formerly Otago Festival of the Arts, but that's semantics. Never mind. Thank you, Linda. Welcome this afternoon. It's nice to see you all here, and it's nice to be able to chair this forum again on behalf of the DPAG and the University of Otago. Now, this forum this afternoon is an opportunity for the fellows to hear from the fellows about their journey and of these creative artists. There have been and there will be other opportunities during the course of their fellowships to experience their work at other places. But today, the forum is for us to learn more about how these wonderful people, how they sort of tick. Another thing, we've all got tabletop microphones. I hope you can hear. If you can't, any time during the course of this hour and a half, please just give us a shout, and we'll adjust the volume accordingly so that you can actually hear what's being said rather than straining to hear what's being said. That's housekeeping. The University Fellowship has been in existence for over 50 years. Well, not all of them. And they're a huge testimony, I think, to the University of Otago's commitment to the creative process. Charles Brash wrote in 1959, and I quote, "Part of the university's proper business is to act as a nurse to the arts, or more exactly, to the imagination, as it expresses itself in the arts and sciences. Imagination may flourish anywhere, but it should flourish as a matter of course in the university. For it is only through the imaginative thinking that society grows materially and intellectually." So, well done, Otago University, for having these fellowships. I'd like to introduce the fellows to you now, and we didn't cast lots as to see who would sit where to who was going to speak first. It just happened that way. I did tell them that it would be up and down. So on the end here we have Louise Potiki Bryant, who is the Plummer Fellow this year. Melinda Szymanik, who is the children's... Well, it's a big long word.
The University of Otago College of Education, Creative New Zealand Children's Writer in Residence.
Thank you. Yeah. Children's Fellow. Yeah. It's a quicker way that I'm going to say it. Sorry. Jeremy Mayall, the Mozart Fellow. Patrick Lundberg, the Hodgkins. Thank you. The Hodgkins Fellow, and the Burns Fellow is Majella Cullinane. Right. What I'd like to do to start with is to invite each of them to say a few words about themselves, about their careers to date, and the journey that they are on as an artist. Your time starts now. Yeah. Louise.
Tēnā koutou. Ko te mea tuatahi kei te pirangi hau ki te mihi atu ki a koe, Nicholas, mō tō mihi ki a mātou katoa. Ko te mea tuarua kei te pirangi hau ki te mihi ki kaitahu whānui, ngā takata whenua o tēnei rohi. Kei te pirangi hau ki te mihi ki a koutou, ngā fellows, ngā kai toi o te whare wānanga o Otago. Kei te pirangi hau ki te mihi ki a koutou katoa ki oku matua, kei konei. Ko waiau, ko auraki te mauka, ko waitaki te awa, ko taki timu te waka, ko ihai arawa, ko wirimu pōtiki o ki tūpuna. No oti pōti a hau engari, anai nei kei te noho hau I piha, he kai kani a hau. Kia ora koutou, my name is Louise Potiki Bryant and I'm the current Caroline Plummer Fellow in Community Dance for 2014. So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised here in Dunedin, in Ōtepoti. These are my parents here. thank you for letting me live with you for the last 6 months. So on my mum's side, she's full half Irish and Scottish. My father has ngaitahu whakapapa to Otago Marae on the peninsula. So so I was born and raised here, went to school here and danced right from when I was a young girl. Lucky enough to do ballet and gymnastics and some kapahaka at Araituru Marae as I was growing up. Then I went to study at the University of Otago and studied Māori studies and law. But I started to dance all my assessments, and one of my lecturers who taught mana wahine, she said, you have to go to dance schools because this is not the place for you. So anyway, so I ended up going to Unitec School of Performing and Screen Arts and studied contemporary dance there. Whilst there, I met some fabulous, amazing dancers, Jack Gray, Delina Wehi-Peihana, Justine Hohaya, and we started a collective called Atamira Dance Collective, which has now become Atamira Dance Company, is going from strength to strength. So I've been with Atamira for 11 years, and I was a choreographer and a dancer with the company. During that time, I also made a number of solo works and got very interested in film and video, so I also do video as an art form as well. And then also during that time, I was lucky enough to work with a researcher and musician called Te Ahu Karamu Charles Royal. His research is particularly around the whare tāpere, which were pa-based houses of entertainment, games, storytelling, dance, haka, puppetry, and much, much more. So he's encouraged many artists around the country, and there are other artists doing it in their own right, to be inspired by what we know of the whare tāpere to create new artworks, new dance, new haka, but based on these very, very old art forms that unfortunately fell into disuse as our pa-based living. We moved from pa-based living into more urban ways of living. So anyway, that's what led me to here, and I've been here for the last 6 months working with kaitahu whānui, with my own whānau and hapu, and some students from the university to create a project around a kaitahu version of the whare tāpere, which is called a whare haka. And we've created a new work called Te Motu Tapu o Tiniro, which we performed recently at Toitū. And I was lucky enough to work with the Mozart Fellow, Jeremy Mayall. He created an amazing soundtrack for us for a film part of the work as well. So that's me. Kia ora, everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's a really hard act to follow. Hi, I'm Melinda Szymanik. I think I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was about 9. Fell in love with books. My favourite place to be was on the inside of a book, and then I kept it a secret for years because New Zealanders, we didn't really have a children's writing culture here. Most of the books I read when I was a child were from England or the US, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Lord of the Rings, The Dark is Rising, Little House on the Prairie. So I kind of was pre-Margaret Mahy, pre-Joy Cowley, and I thought writers came from exotic overseas countries with rich literary histories. So I didn't really do anything about my writing until I had children of my own and decided that I couldn't keep it secret any longer. So I came out of the writing closet and started writing seriously about 15 years ago and started submitting my work here and there. Got published, so I've been published with short stories for children, picture books and novels for juniors, senior children and young adults as well. And when I heard that I was going to be the writer in residence, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be 6 months of locking myself away and doing nothing but tapping furiously on my computer, completing the 3 projects that I had in mind. But strangely, the year hasn't quite turned out that way. I think one of the things I didn't realise about the residency was that it would also not only give me financial support and give me recognition as a writer and give me space and time to write, but that it would also raise my profile. I think one of the big things we suffer from, maybe particularly here in New Zealand, but I think it is possibly true of writers everywhere, that we're kind of invisible to the wider community and to the public. If you ask any child in the school who their favourite writer is, it's Roald Dahl, or in fact, if you ask them for a book by a New Zealander, it's usually Roald Dahl. So we are kind of invisible to a certain extent, and it's been really exciting to have that change this year, and I think my profile has been kind of raised beyond just the writing community. But that's also meant that I've been doing a lot of talks and workshops and fortunately as well festivals, which have just been wonderful. So yes, it's been not quite as much writing as I'd hoped, but everything to do with writing and literature for children here in New Zealand. This residency is the only one specifically for children, so I've been really honoured that it's been given to me this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy. I'm originally from Hamilton. I started playing music when I was 5. I started playing piano. My mum was a piano teacher, so she encouraged me to learn from someone else, not her, because it's quite hard to teach people you're related to. And then I went through school and did music, but I didn't really kind of take it seriously as a career, and I enrolled in university to study law, and was but before I started, I was applying for a scholarship to study the law, and had to write 1 page on why I wanted to be a lawyer, and I spent 3 weeks trying to bullshit my way through 1 page, and I couldn't do it, so I changed my enrollment to music, and I have been composing ever since, and I'm just finishing the final stages of getting my PhD completed as well, so I'm still studying as well. But in terms of writing music, I work in a huge range of fields. In my time here as the Mozart Fellow, I have worked on a couple of film scores, one a short thriller filmed in New York, the other is a feature film made by an independent director in Auckland. I have produced pop music remixes for a couple of bands around the country. I have worked on the piece with Lou. I'm working on a couple of multimedia cross-disciplinary pieces with theatre performers, dancers, video projection, lighting and sound, which will be premiered, one in August and one in November. And I've got 1 album of new music finished and a second one halfway. So the album that's finished is for piano and electronics, and it will get released digitally on the first week of August, and all proceeds from the sale of the album will go to the Himalayan Trust. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you. Patrick.
Yep, I'm Patrick, the Francis Hodgkins Fellow. I've got some notes here. I was born in Sweden and grew up in Wellington and Auckland. I studied in Auckland from 2002 to 2005 at the University of Auckland. Since then I've practiced as an artist, sort of more or less part-time, working odd jobs, apart from 1 year in Stockholm, where I went and was a guest student at the art school there. It's very nice. I'm a painter, and I exhibit pretty regularly in both Auckland and Wellington at some dealer galleries that I have there. That's pretty much me.
Hi, I'm Majella, and I'm originally from Limerick in the southwest of Ireland. How did I get here? Well, a rather circuitous way, I would say. Something a little bit similar to Melinda. I always wanted to write since I was about maybe 11 or 12. But I didn't really know that you could be a writer as such. I grew up in in Limerick in the 1980s, and there was a lot of unemployment and mass immigration. And it wasn't something you kind of said, I want to be a writer. If you said you want to be a writer, people would probably look at you like you were nuts. You know, people were lucky enough to have a job as such. So yeah, it was something I kind of dabbled in, and then I went to university and I studied English literature and Italian. I did some English language teaching for a few years, and I travelled in Spain and Greece, and that's where I met my New Zealand partner. We met in Spain, and we travelled for a while, and we were in Greece, and I got a bit fed up of English language teaching, and I thought, well, what can I do, something to do with books? And then I thought I'll do publishing. So I went off in another sort of direction, and I did that for a couple of years, but then I missed the teaching. And I got to the point where I was living in a very dull commuter town in Ireland and looking for an escape. And I was made redundant, which in a way was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it meant that I sort of, you know, that kind of crossroads scenario in your life. What are you going to do now? You're almost 30. You want to be a writer. If you don't do it now, you'll never do it. So I started writing. I got back into poetry, and I applied for an Irish Arts Council grant to study at St Andrews University in Scotland, which was an amazing place. It's a really, really beautiful part of Scotland, one of the oldest university in Scotland. So from there, I sort of had various short-term gigs in writing, like residencies and a fellowship. And we were living in Scotland and a bit fed up of talk of the recession, and we thought, oh, we'll go to New Zealand, and then it arrived in New Zealand. And so anyway, to cut a long story short, I just continued writing, and I was working part-time for Massey University, doing mainly teaching poetry, and working on poetry and essays, and then we were living in Paikakariki, which is a really pretty part of Kapiti Coast. And I said to my partner, I said, you know, there's this Robert Burns Fellowship coming up. What do you know, if you know, on the very, 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 very unlikely possibility of me getting it, would you be open to moving to Dunedin? And he said, oh, well, you know, half my family are from around that area, so yeah, no problem. So yeah, that's me. That's how we got here. So yeah.
Can we stay with you, Majella, and just ask the question about your writing process, the creative process, how you work, how you start, your inspiration, where you get it from, and the sort of methods which you use to put words down.
Right. Well, for me, poetry and prose are completely different beasts in the sense of how I approach them. I don't, with a story, at least in my experience with a story, you can kind of have an idea of what you want to write, and there's a sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and even if you don't have an end, you can sort of work towards that. Whereas with a poem, you can't really come at it and sort of wake up, well, at least not for me, wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to write a poem this morning. You have to kind of come at it from the side somehow. With both, though, I have to say, I'm kind of old-fashioned. I write by hand with both, even with fiction, because I find that typing it, and I think Melinda does it directly, I find typing sort of gets in my way. I feel like I have to go back and edit it, or there should be a comma there or a semicolon or whatever. Whereas if I just write by hand, then it's very, just kind of comes out of me, you know. And I love that quote by Hemingway, who said, your first draft is always shit. Mm-hmm. And it's very true. And if you keep that in mind, you know, what you write, the first draft, is just getting your story out, then the rest is sort of polishing and editing and so at the moment I've been primarily working on a novel, and I've started doing a little bit of poetry, but I find it very difficult to do both at the same time, because for me poetry is kind of a quieter, sort of stiller, the process of writing it is a bit different than prose. So I don't know if that answers
Yes, you
the-
said you come to poetry from the side. You come around sideways. So does that require more muse or something?
No, I have to say I'm going to be unromantic. I don't believe so much in the muse. I think if you're waiting, I mean, certainly when I was 14 and I started writing poetry, it was very much sort of just writing, your kind of teenage angst or something like that. And, I wouldn't have written otherwise. It was only when I felt like it. But later I kind of realised that if you were waiting for the muse, you probably never write anything. So often how I get into something, I don't separate reading from writing. I think for me, at least, they work alongside each other. A lot of young writers, very young writers, when they're starting off, they worry about what Pinter called the anxiety of influence, that you're going to start copying somebody's style. But I think that's part of learning any art form. It's probably the same with painting or with music, that you can learn an awful lot by reading other works, and they can help you find your own voice as well. So for me, they work alongside each other.
Yeah. Patrick, your process, your inspiration, where do you start? When do you...
I was thinking about it yesterday when I was in the studio making a painting, or starting a painting. And I think the thing I like about painting, or the way that I approach it, is you can begin with something extremely arbitrary or almost sort of stupid, and from there on, it's a sort of process of very slowly kind of building meaning out of it or something. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's I never start with this sort of like a concept or something. I never have parameters that I sort of want to fill.
Right, you don't have the finished product in your mind's eye before you start.
No, and there's no
Right.
grappling with the resolution and the sort of the preconceived sort of idea or something.
Where do you start?
It depends on the project.
Okay.
So if it's a film or a theatre piece, typically there's a story or a narrative or something, and I'm responding to that, so it's more of a response. If it's a more kind of popular music, if it's a remix, then the song's already there and I'm just doing an interpretation of it. And if it's not, then I usually would start from the rhythm, because that's something that even if you're tone deaf, you can understand rhythm. So I'd kind of start with that. For popular music, it's very kind of rhythm kind of connects with people more than melody, I think. But for other projects, whether they're collaborative or just because I don't know, I think probably a lot of times it's sound rather than specific notes or specific ideas. It's the sound of something, whether it's natural sound or industrial sound, or whether it's messing around on an old synthesizer and tweaking parameters and finding something that the sound kind of speaks to me more so than anything else, and kind of build from there.
So that would mean that, unlike Majella, who works with an old-fashioned pen and paper, you are working with...
I work with everything I can get my hands on.
Everything, but you don't use a pen and paper probably.
Yeah, no, I do.
You do?
Yeah. So if I'll often sit at a piano with a pen and paper and play and write notes, but I don't write, when I'm doing that, I don't typically use manuscript. I use blank sheets of paper, and I write things as like stacked letters and sketches of contour. So I don't really write...
Just writing for yourself, aren't you?
Yeah. It's a code that I understand.
Sure. Okay.
And it's a shorthand that makes sense to me,
cool.
and then I transfer that into the computer or whatever.
Melinda, you use a computer.
I do use a computer.
What about your process and your inspiration? How do you start?
Depends whether it's something like a picture book or a novel. So if it's a novel, it tends to start as me worrying or dwelling on a particular issue or theme. I've written a novel which has as a backdrop dealing with bullying and how a teenager can overcome fear and gain confidence. And so those were kind of thoughts going around in my head. And it was just a matter of finding a vehicle that allowed me to follow that theme through to a good conclusion. When it's a picture book, it's, people often look at picture books as something that's very simple, that are very simple to write. They're generally less than 1,000 words. That must be jolly easy to kind of dash off. And the truth is, between a 50,000 word children's novel and a 1,000 word picture book, 1,000 words is a lot quicker to write. But the thing that takes the months and months or maybe years is that idea. So with the picture book, it all hinges on that one magic idea that is going to underpin the story. With one of my books, The Song of Kauri, I had the inspiration for that I think it was about 10 years ago. I went to see a movie with my husband. It was an arts festival one, and the short before the movie was about a tree. And I came out of the pictures afterwards and turned to my husband and said, that would make the most amazing picture book. And I went home and started writing it, and nothing happened. I got stuck, and I thought, I have no idea how to actually make that one image that really stood out to me. I couldn't transform it into the story I wanted it to be. And it took me 10 years for me to gain experience as a writer, for me to have other influences and other things happen in my life, for me to work out how I was going to transform it into a story that worked. And it finally did about 18 months ago. Inspiration comes from everywhere. I make sure that I feed my mind all the time. I need to go out and do things, meet with people, watch movies, watch TV, talk to my kids, go and do school visits and talk to other children, talk with my peers, and just live life, because if you're constantly drawing on your own imagination and never restocking it, you quickly run on empty and burn out.
So do you, whilst you're in the fellowship, I guess there's a routine that you can work to, which you can make up yourself. When you didn't have this fellowship, how would you write? Would you write daily? Did you have some sort of discipline? No.
No,
Okay.
I'm a very undisciplined person,
Yeah.
and it always seemed that the desire to write would turn up at acid hour at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock when the kids were coming home from school wanting something to eat, and that's when I was kind of getting into the swing of things. So afternoons work better. I don't write every day in normal circumstances. I have been here, and the way I've got around that, because it's not my normal routine, is I've been working on 3 projects rather than one. So if I'm running dry on one, I'll switch to another and come fresh to it. And that's worked quite well. 3 is probably one too much, though. 2 is better.
Yeah. Lou, your creative process, where do you start? Do you have a commission is a commission, I guess, but if you're not doing that, how do you...
Yeah, I'm a bit like Jeremy in that it depends on the kaupapa of each, the concept of each work, or what the idea is for each work. And my process has developed and changed over the years. Originally, when I started out in choreography, whakapapa was a really important concept to me. Whakapapa meaning genealogy, but it also means the creation of layers. So often my work would have double meanings within and lots of layers to it. And I keep lots of journals, and ideas, images and things come to me, and I either draw or write them down. So as a choreographer, you have that process, that part where you step back and you're doing your own research and your own your own time to mull over and research your concept, but then you go and work with the dancers or work with the musicians you're working with, and it's that part of it's very collaborative. And then you have all the tools that you work with for that process when you're working on choreography. I'm an avid second-hand shopper, as my mother knows well, and in my early kind of career, what I would often do is, and this would just happen by chance, a lot of it's serendipity. I would find a prop, like a thing in a second-hand store. Like, for example, I found an iron, and it was an old iron from like the 1930s, 40s, and I ended up creating, it led to a work called Te Aroha Me Te Mamai, which is about Māori women's experience during the war, from this one prop from the iron. And I ended up meeting this woman, Grayana Barrett. It just sends me on a journey, and I find these people, and I ended up telling her story through this dance. And that just all came from going to a second-hand shop and finding an iron. However, my work has developed in that nowadays, in terms of working with the whare tapere, I'm very inspired by atua, gods of Māori whakapapa. So in terms of the whare tapere, hine ruhi is the deity of feminine dance. And so I'm very inspired by the qualities of hine ruhi. She is the light that dances on the early morning dew. And so you find a way to embody these images of this light dancing on the early morning dew. She's the woman that brings about the dawn with her dance. So when she dances, when an excellent female dancer dances, she transforms and becomes hine ruhi. And this is a process we call whakahua, which means coming to form or transforming. So when you dance as hine ruhi, you're not like her or pretending to be like her. You become hine ruhi, you become the atua, you become that god. And so it's the mana of hine ruhi manifest in the dancer. And then also there's the qualities of tāne rore. He's the atua of masculine dance in Māori dance. And he's the son of the sun and hine raumati, which is the summer maiden. And so he is the heat that rises from the earth on a hot summer's day. So when you see the wiri in the hands, that is the imitation of the light, of the heat. So these are qualities of light and heat at different times of the day. So we draw on these qualities in the dance of the whare tapere. And so that's what I've been doing there. That's just a little taste of it.
That's good.
Mm.
I'd like to ask the question now about who your work is actually for. Whether it's for yourself or for your public or your audience, and how much that affects the creative process. If you're actually creating something for an end use, or whether it's more personal than that.
Shall I go?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, yeah. Well, for this particular project that I'm doing at the moment, it's all about community and it's about whānau. And so this particular project, what's more important is the connections we make amongst one another. Something I learnt from Te Ahu Karamu, Charles Royal, that the end product is important too, but it's also how we are with one another. And he talks about manaakitanga, which is upholding the mana of each person within the group. And so it's about how we are. It's about creating that space for everyone to feel uplifted and get something out of the project, as opposed to the dance being the most important. Does that make sense?
So in that case, for that example, the audience is not
really...
the
audience is important as well, because we need to acknowledge their mana,
sure,
and so everyone feels that reciprocity, the sense that we're all connected, and But,
okay. So it's interesting now, as an author, have you failed if some of your writing is not published? Or are you writing it just because you need to and you want to?
I write because the story comes and wants to be put down on the page, and so an idea interests me too much to ignore it, and I'll write it down. And I was almost going to say that I don't think of the audience. I write for myself to begin with, but it's always in the back of my mind, and I guess the more experience I've gained and the more I've written, it's just automatic that you consider your audience. So I know what I can and can't include in a picture book versus a novel, and a novel that's for young adults versus intermediate age children. So you automatically kind of know what to include and not include. So in the back of my mind, I'm always aware, but I have to please myself first. And I think if I'm interested, if I'm bored, it's a bad sign. And if I'm bored, of course, an audience is going to be bored. So if I'm interesting myself, then a good chance that the audience will like it as well. And I've read so many books over the years that I'm familiar with what is meant to be part and parcel of a book that's going to work. If it doesn't get picked up or published, no, that's not a failure. It's just maybe its time hasn't come, and I've had books that have not been picked up that have actually been published 5 or 6 years later. Or it's just an experiential thing where I've learnt something through that process that's helped me then to do better on the next project. So, yeah.
Jeremy, do you write always for somebody else?
No.
No.
When I'm working on films and things, typically you're working with a lot of conventions, and you're working with trying to please the director or the producer or whoever else is involved with that process. So it becomes a balancing act between doing something that I'm creatively happy with, and that also supports the story in the right way, and that also isn't too derivative, and also keeps the director happy. I'm lucky enough to have had an ongoing relationship with 4 different directors, and I tend to do all of their films, and it's got to the point where they just kind of let me go. They don't give me any guidelines or anything. We have a discussion beforehand of if there's anything sonically that inspired them, or any sounds or any ideas, and then I just kind of go and write. The rest of the stuff, I'm typically just kind of writing because the idea is there, and I do it because I want to do it, and I write every day. I write, and often it's a different project. The actual process of getting music written and finished is quite quick for me, but there's like months beforehand that it dwells in the back of my mind. So there's all of this, and then when it comes time to sit down and do that idea, then I don't know, a couple of days, a week or something, and then it's there. So I just kind of do it and then move on to the next.
So is the process complete when you finished, or is the process complete when it's performed? For example, you were saying earlier, before the audience arrived, that you're doing a commission at the moment with Tessa Peterson and somebody. Is it for violin and?
Oh no, I'm doing 2 pieces with Tessa. So one, I'm writing a piece for violin and backing track.
Yeah.
Which is still very kind of in the early stages, floating in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
The second piece that I'm doing that Tessa's involved with is it's a multimedia piece that I've designed to premiere in the butterfly enclosure at the Otago Museum. I took my son in there, and my wife and my son, we went in there, and I was just kind of, there's something about that space that's really interesting. And when they do the butterfly release in the mornings, they turn the waterfall off. And when they turn the waterfall off, I noticed that they have like kind of canned jungle ambience pumping through the speakers, and you don't notice it when the waterfall's on because the waterfall's so loud. And so then I was looking and trying to find where all these speakers were, and then thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to write a piece and premiere it in there. So we'll have 5 musicians, violin, flute, guitar, bass, and singer, and they'll all be spaced around the room, and the audience can move around the room and experience the work as they move through the space with the butterflies, and we'll have video projection on the ceiling and kind of full sound. So
that sounds exciting. When's that going to be? Can you tell us?
End of November, 29th of November. Yeah, but that's just, I mean, that's still again very early stage. So that for me, the process is definitely complete when it's either performed or recorded. Right. So some of my work only really exists in a recorded format, in a studio-based format, and so that's the end of that piece. But then when it's performed, that brings something else to it, because you're working with musicians, you're working with humans, and they're doing their interpretation of the piece. And I'm very open to people bringing themselves to the work. I'm not. I try not to be too controlling of my music. So I sort of, this is kind of how it is. What can you bring to it?
Right. So Patrick, who do you paint for? Are you happy when you're finished, or are you happy when it's hung?
I think I'm happy when I'm doing it. Yeah. I do it for myself. Yeah. I'm the primary audience, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. I see art making as a kind of speculative enterprise, I suppose. So I try not to think too much about an audience. In fact, I think very little about the audience, and consequently, when I find out that I have one, I'm pleasantly surprised. It's quite nice.
You're quite lucky then, I think, if you have an audience by default. Yeah.
I am aware that I have an audience, but I just try not to think about it.
Yeah. I think it's quite different with children's writing, because you obviously do have a particular audience in mind, and there are certain things you can write, and you can't have cuss words in there and stuff like that, but I don't have that. I suppose primarily I think you're kind of doing it for yourself, and as Melinda said, if you were having fun, or if you were kind of entertaining yourself, or whatever view of entertainment you have is entirely up to you. What might entertain you might bore someone else silly, but I think primarily I'm doing it for myself. I've never really thought about an audience, because unlike Melinda, I've published a poetry book, but I haven't published a novel. So, if you were some sort of if you'd written many novels like, say, Stephen King or Alexander McCall Smith or whatever, you might be a bit more aware of your audience, and they will tell you exactly what they would expect of a particular novel. And I think because that isn't a factor, it may be in 25 years or something, but so primarily for myself. But obviously you always keep in mind, well I try to anyway with writing a novel, is the story is really important, is the story working? Is the story going to, come across? Am I going to be, is someone going to be able to understand this, or to kind of relate to the character or to the situation? And I think that in that sense, I would think of an audience. Yeah.
When is a work complete? When do you know that you've finished? Do you have difficulty putting the final full stop and the end at the end of your books?
No, but you can always go back to something and see where you could have improved it, even when it's in print form. You never feel completely satisfied, and it's never...
So do you think that's normal, or is that just you?
I think that's normal.
Do you think that's normal? Do you know when to put the paintbrush down?
Not always. I think the work that I'm producing at the moment, it's an interesting question, because it's sort of the work that I'm making is structurally never finished.
Okay.
So it's finished to some extent. I put it take it out of the studio, but the work is ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah, in some sense.
So can it be frustrating to know when you're finished, or to know that you're not finished, or you've got a deadline and you've reached it and you could still...
It's when you're sick of it.
When you're sick of it, you're
I don't want
finished.
to see this again.
With
Like
dance,
Mozart.
because it's a very collaborative art form, and you're paying dancers to be there for a certain period of rehearsal.
So you finish when the money runs out, huh?
Well, you're actually finished when you've got the show is on this date, and it has to be done by that day.
Yeah, okay.
And you've got your dancers for usually only 4 weeks in this country,
yeah.
maybe 5 if you're really lucky, sometimes even 2, and then you have to have your work done by the end. But that's why this process has been really nice for me, because I've had 6 months and to work and have space, time to think, and come back to work with the dancers. It's been really great, because usually you've got a really tight... That's if you're working with a group of people. If you're doing a solo work, of course you can take more time with it, and but there will always be that deadline of the show must go on. Yeah.
Do you find as a musician that you have difficulty knowing when you're done, or you know when it's done? I'm
pretty decisive when it comes to knowing when something's done, and I don't like to dwell on things for too long. I've done enough dwelling on it prior to the creation, and so once it's created, then very rarely will I go back and look at anything. My PhD process has shown me that I'm not a big fan of doing that. Having to spend 4.5 years on a single project, and it's gone through a number of revisions and stuff, I'm not...
With dance, we do go back and look at every show we do. You might revise and work some parts. Yeah,
well, so that's where you're sort of different, I guess. Isn't it? Yes. Yeah. See, it's interesting. I think that with a book, for example, that lasts forever. With a painting, and with music and with dance, the ownership of that goes. For painting, you might sell it, it's gone to somebody else, so it's vanished, it's not there anymore for you. Yeah. For dance, it's an ephemeral thing, it's a period of time. Music is a period of time, and then it's sort of gone.
But I think with dance particularly so, because with music you can have a recorded version of it, but the recorded version of a dance will never be the same as the dance itself. So that's one thing I do find sometimes frustrating, is that I can't really show anyone this is
what I've done.
Yeah. So that's why I'm quite inspired to do other, I do work on video and other art forms as well as part of my practice. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering whether that as an artist, that letting go, actually giving your creation, your baby away, is whether that's a hard thing to do.
I think it always comes back, especially in New Zealand. It's quite a small...
so it's...
I feel like it's a healthy but small art market. Somehow you'll see it again. And often, obviously I haven't had a very long career, but what I have learned is, with the few things that I have sold, you foster relationships with those people, so you sort of don't lose it. Well, in my experience, maybe if you have a more sort of global career or something, then it's jettisoned. It's not such a problem for me though.
And I'm wondering if any of you look back at your earlier work and think that you would like to have done it differently. Sorry, is that the wrong thing to say?
No, it's true.
Just not done it at all.
Oh, really?
more often.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh.
Yeah, you always feel like you could have, you could have done it better. I remember someone told me once, this French writer called Valéry or something, he said, a poem is never finished, it's just abandoned. And I think that's the same with the story. I think there's a certain point where you've been working on it for so long and you've been tinkering with it, and you abandon it for 3 months or 4 months, or in one case I've got a novel that I started in like 2006, and you take it out at the odd time and you kind of think, I should go back to that sometime, and you may well, or you may just totally abandon it, or but yeah, I mean, there comes a point where you just have to, there really isn't much more you can do, and then it's somebody else's problem, like it's an editor, they can kind of maybe offer guidance or polishing or whatever, but
it's progress too, though, because you're always moving forward. I mean, books, stories to a certain extent are like boyfriends, where you get bored with the old one and then you're looking at the hot new idea and thinking, he's all right, I think
that can be a distraction as well, though.
For sure.
You have to sort of sometimes, and I don't know if Melinda has this, but I have about 3 abandoned novels, because I get to a certain point, where the boyfriend is like, oh, I've known him for like so long, and and then you get another idea, because I write I'm really interested in historical fiction, so I read a lot of history, and I go, oh, that would be really interesting, I could do something on that, and you kind of think, so you have to be careful as well, because you could have a lot of half-finished relationships, that never really develop anywhere.
I have discovered with some old half-finished relationships, though, that I've come back to them years later and finished them off and actually had them published, so
Yeah.
I never really totally break up.
Yeah.
The University of Otago Fellowship, I think for all of you, the parameters of it are that you are not required to actually produce anything as part of the fellowship. Oh, you are.
Oh, yeah.
You are.
Yeah, I have to do a big show.
You have to do a big. Oh, well, half of you are. So half of you aren't then. Is that an impediment to you as a discipline that you can be down here at Otago University for a year or 6 months or whatever it is, and you're not required to actually do anything? Does that work in your favour or against you?
I think you'd be silly to waste, to not be working on projects during that time available.
Yeah.
It's a godsend.
Yeah.
Perhaps does it free you up even more to...
Oh, I think there's an element of, I wanted to do this. I applied because I had projects in mind and I was keen to have that time available. But also I think I've got my own kind of drive with an element of guilt that, I've got to do something. It's there is that drive. I have to produce something. I write all the time, whether it's not every day or not is irrelevant. I'm just always thinking about books, always writing, and I can't imagine that you'd come down here and do the fellowship if you weren't
driven.
wanting, if you weren't driven.
For the first couple of months, I did often think that someone was going to come and knock on my door and say, where's this thing that you're supposed to have done?
That's my, I guess, where I'm coming from, that you don't have deadlines.
It is very self-directed, yeah.
So you therefore, I guess
true.
what you were saying, Linda, is true. You do need to be disciplined because you're not being forced into having a deadline. You've got to produce some body of work, except you who do. Now you are required, the Francis Hodgkins is required to
Yeah, I'm pretty...
produce an exhibition by the time you've finished.
Yeah, the show's in February.
Right.
Yeah.
At the end of it.
Yeah, and there's you make a catalogue as well.
Okay.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And the plumber requires a, what
So
was it,
I
community
had
dance?
to come up with a community dance project and fulfil that, what I said I would do, which is you make a community, it has to be a performance element to it, and then I'm also creating a booklet of these dance exercises for all the participants involved, and potentially creating what's called a whare karioi, which is a travelling troupe of people who are going to travel around the country and things like that.
Okay. It was touched on earlier. It's a question I'd like to ask. The five of you have got this wonderful opportunity to spend this time focusing exclusively on your disciplines. I'm wondering, while you're all here at Otago University, how many of you collaborate? And if you do, how does it work? And if you don't, are you glad that you don't?
Go, Jeremy, go.
I'm a big believer in collaborative art. A lot of what I do is collaborative in some way, whether it's working with musicians on pieces that I've written for them or working with directors or whatever. So I'm collaborating with 1, 2, 3 people. So Lou and I have done as she explained, I wrote the score for a film
Called
dance piece.
Yeah.
Which was performed a couple of weeks ago and will be performed again
Soon.
in a couple of weeks. That was a live version of it, and there's going to be a video-only version as well, which we'll put online and send to festivals. I'm going to write a piece of music inspired by the Song of the Kauri.
You're going to write that quite soon, aren't you?
Yeah, fingers crossed.
August the 1st.
I'll have it done for the launch of the book on August the 1st, which we've just discussed.
We're just excited that I'm going to dance in it.
So that just happened 20 minutes ago.
Oh, I'm glad we came together.
And writing a song cycle with Majella. She's going to write 3 poems.
She's going to. You mean she hasn't?
Going to. No, I haven't.
Okay.
And,
no, I've given him a wee bit of a heads up on the sound, so.
Yeah. And a friend of mine, soprano named Julia Booth from Hamilton, is going to come down to sing it, and that will be on the same day as we premiere the Butterfly piece.
So can you tell us that butterfly date again?
29th of November.
29th of November.
But there'll be posters.
Okay. It's now 2 o'clock, I see, and I'd now like to open it to the floor to anybody who would like to ask questions of anybody.